Good morning, guys. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to Shingletown Roofing. My name is Matt, and today we're going to walk you guys through the basics of installing our architectural shingles. So if you're used to watching our weekly uploads, this video will be a little bit different for you, but for you avid DIYers, this will get you through the basics of installing these shingles and how to get the job done on your own time. I guess first and foremost, I always want to recommend, if you've never been on a roof before, if you're not 100% confident in going up there yourself, if you're working with any kind of steep slope, I'd always recommend just contacting a contractor. It's not worth the risk. And, there's a reason these people have invested money into their companies and invested their time into becoming skilled and know how to scale these roofs and do the job safely and effectively. But, if you're set on doing the job yourself, which you probably are if you're watching this video, then this is for you. So I guess before I walk you guys through the installation and how we install these products, I wanted to just give you a brief little rundown on the products themselves and some of the differences between the architectural shingles and the 3-tab shingles. So what we have here on the top, actually, you know what, we'll start with the 3-tabs. So 3-tab overall going to be a less durable, less expensive product. It's going to have a lot lower wind ratings. You're overall just going to have a lot less of a durable product. It's going to get you about 15-year lifespan on average, whereas the architecturals, you're overall going to have a much thicker product. They're a little bit more expensive, and you're going to get anywhere from about 20 to even upwards of 30 years possibly with the architecturals. So the biggest difference with the 3-tab versus architectural, 3-tab has 3 separate tabs per individual shingle. Now keep in mind, this is actually a section of capping. This is not a true 3-tab shingle, but this is, we actually don't install 3-tab shingles anymore, but this is the closest thing I had on hand. So you're gonna have 3 individual tabs per shingle. And the way I look at it is it has 6 points of contact where wind can catch these tabs. And as soon as that tar starts to wear out, it dries out, cracks, lose its stick, then the wind is just going to blow those tabs back and they're going to eventually rip off. So you're going to see homes all over the place. If you drive through subdivisions with 3 tabs installed, it's very common on new housing. You're going to see tabs blown off all over the place. And the biggest concern with 3-tab blow-offs is when you have a shingle joint below it. So I'll show you just with a quick demonstration of these architecturals. We put our 3-tab on top. And so what we have here are the 2 shingles below it are meeting and what we call a shingle joint. And let's say in this scenario, this tab, it's basically like a version of Russian roulette. What tab's going to blow off and what tab's going to expose a shingle joint. So let's say this middle tab starts to lift, it blows off, and now all of a sudden it's exposing the shingle joint of the 2 shingles below it. So that's the biggest concern. A lot of new housing, they don't use any underlayments, and then it's just basically exposing bare roof decking, and it's letting water get directly under those shingles, finding the nearest plywood joint, and then dripping into the attic. So it's something super common, at least here. We see it all the time, and it's going to be a big cause for repair. So architecturals are going to have a lot higher wind ratings. They're a thicker shingle. You're not going to see blow-offs with architecturals nearly as often. And that's because we have one solid piece of tar along the bottom. And so wind is going to have a lot harder time catching these corners, lifting them, and actually getting a chance to blow these shingles off. Now keep in mind, we live in southern Ontario, where we don't see a lot of tropical winds. We don't see a lot of tropical storms, things like that. Now, if you live somewhere, let's say Florida, Texas, where you're going to see a lot of tropical storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, then I would recommend looking at an Owens Corning product, an Owens Corning shingle. They have their Sure Strip shingles, which are fantastic, really good wind ratings. So if you live somewhere where you have, that kind of issue, then I would highly recommend those products. For down here in southern Ontario, we get by just fine with our standard architecturals. These are I guess your right side, this is a GAF HDZ shingle, and then on the left is a CertainTeed Landmark shingle. So CertainTeed is our main manufacturer that we switched to last year. We used to solely use GAF, but because of quality control issues, we started making the transition over CertainTeed and couldn't be happier. They're a go-to product. They're what we always recommend on every house, and we've been super happy working with them. GAF is a little bit cheaper of a product. You're going to find it in your traditional box store, Home Depot, Lowe's, Rona, places like that, whereas Landmark is more of a specialty. It's still a very common shingle. It's a little bit more expensive, but overall the quality control, the warranties, the way they take care of their customers, their warranty claims is fantastic, and in my opinion, one of the, they're an industry leading company. Made by Saint-Gobain. Saint-Gobain's been around since the 1600s. They're a very old company, very reputable brand, and we love their products. So that's the main differences, between our 3 tabs and our architecturals. You can see here down below, we have what's called a starter shingle. So these are going to be something that you're going to want to order as well if you're doing your roof. These are super basic. They're just a solid piece of asphalt shingle, and they have just a simple tar seam that runs along the top, and this gets nailed down to your drip edge on top of your underlayment, and we'll show you guys that in just a few minutes. And then finally, we just have an example of a ridge cap. So this is a CertainTeed Shadow Ridge cap, and this is used along hips and ridges. So this is the final piece of the puzzle when you're installing your roof. Now, depending on how your roof is built, this is just a simple eave and rake. It's a gable-ended roof. There's no hips on my demonstration that I have here, but we'll walk you guys through that and show you what you would do if you're installing on hips. But these just get folded over. They get placed right on your hip, and same with the ridge. And yeah, super simple products, but we thought we'd show you a little example of them. So I think that's pretty much it. That's the basics of the 2 products, and now we're going to show you guys the installation process, and how we actually get started with all of our residential re-roofs. All right, guys, so now that we've got our bare roof deck, you've got all your shingles stripped, you're ready for some brand new drip edge. So we just have some standard black aluminum drip edge here, and what I personally like to do is instead of cutting this flush with the edge of my rake and then running a separate piece of drip edge up my rake, I like to actually cut this and bend it around. I think it just gives it a little bit of a cleaner look, and it's just personally what I enjoy doing. So because we have 2 rakes on either end here, typically you just be doing one side at a time, working your way across until you get to the other rake. But in this case, we're just going to stick both sides out. We're going to mark that, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut along the top of the drip edge. Okay, now we're going to cut out this little rib. Now we're going to cut out this bottom little rib. All right, we're going to leave the middle in place. And now what we're going to do is we're going to place this drip edge. Just grab our nailer here. What we're going to do is we're going to place this drip edge along the eave. We're going to run it, and we're going to bend this section of drip that we just cut so that it folds in on itself and then meets the rake. Personally, I like to bend it so that the top fold here is running on top of our eave. Just in case you're to have any water that's running in along this rake, it flows over top and not underneath. You can see how water would jam up against here and maybe hit this nail a little bit easier. So I like to fold that on top, make that all nice, and then that's good to nail. Then we do the same process all the way along. I can put in another nail here. I like to keep my nails a little bit higher up on the drip edge, and that just gives me a little bit extra coverage. So now we're going to go to this end and do the same process. So we're just cutting it the exact same way. Now we're going to fold this in, give it a nice bend along that rake, and nail that in place. All right, guys, so you don't need a ton of nails in there, just enough to fasten it, and you're going to be just fine. All right, so now that our drip edge is on along our eave, we're going to finish up the rakes and install the rest of it. So now in the case that you're running your drip edge all the way up to the ridge or the peak of the roof, what you're going to do is you're going to basically take the same concept of what we just did, but we want to, instead of folding it sideways, we want to fold it down. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to take the very edge of my drip here, and we're just going to cut this straight across like so. And then what we can do, we're going to cut the top, and now we can fold this drip edge like so. And it's a little bit easier when you're working with a ridge, but as you can see, you just fold this over top of your ridge, and it makes a little bit cleaner of an angle than just butting two pieces up together, at least in my opinion. So that's how we would do that. We're just going to cut this off clean. All right, now we're going to take a quick measurement here. I'm not going to be too picky with this because we're just going up to the top here. We don't have a ridge or anything that we're going on. So now what I personally like to do is overlap my drip edge. I don't like butting it up tight. So we're going to overlap that. And now we're just going to cut at where my line is. Cut that off. All nicey. I'm going to place that drip edge in place. And again, what I like to do with my cuts is having the cuts facing down. So again, if water was, you don't want to have this joint, our bottom section lapping the top. You want to make sure that top section is overlapped onto our bottom. Give that a little tap, nice and flush, and that's good to nail in. Pinch it up tight, and that's good to go. All right, guys, so now that we have our drip edge on and installed, now we're going to start with our underlayment. So this is our ice and water barrier. What we're going to do is we're going to roll this out, and what ice and water does, as I explained earlier, is it is a barrier against ice damming. So this is actually a very sticky product, which you'll see here in just a second. Looks like we have just enough. I'm using all spare material here that we just kind of have kicking around and making it work. So what we want to do is line up this ice and water, and I like to get it as low onto the drip edge as I can, making sure I cover up all of these nails along both the rake and the eave of the roof. So we lay down our ice and water, and then as you can see, we have plastic on the back end of this product. So as we peel this back, you can see that this is sticky. And today is not really a sunny day. It's not very hot out right now. But once that sun starts hitting the ice and water, it's very, very, very tacky. So we lay that ice and water down. We got one side stuck. And we make our way across. We just pull that plastic out. And this product sticks right to the aluminum drip edge and makes a nice tight seal. And that way, if any ice damming was to happen in our east troughs, this keeps everything nice and sealed in and protected. So it has one piece of plastic along the bottom and another section of plastic along the top. So we peel this off, and this gets stuck down just like so. So you can see we're just a little bit short on that side. So we're going to take a second piece of ice and water. Peel that plastic off. And let's say you want to do this in sections. That's no problem. You just want to make sure your joint where your ice and water is just long enough. I would say at minimum roughly 6 inches. Make sure that's nice and stuck along your rake, and you're good to go. All right, guys, so now that we have our ice and water installed, we are ready to move on to our synthetic underlayment. So synthetic underlayment is it's basically a more advanced version of your old school tar paper, and it's what we install on all of our residential projects. Basically, any new re-roof project will get an underlayment paper. So these are made out of a synthetic material. They're a lot more water resistant. They have a lot higher tear resistance. They're a lot tackier for the guys when they're walking on the roof, and just overall a much better product than your traditional tar paper. Now you'll see we don't quite have the reach here to install a full roll of underlayment. You can see it's basically the same size as a sheet of plywood. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna install it as is, but what you would typically be doing on your roof is going from the top of this ice and water sheet, so you can see where this shiny plastic is. You'd be going basically to the top of that product, and there is a solid black line here on pretty much any synthetic underlayment that you're gonna work with. There's gonna be a solid black line, and that's gonna be your overlap line. So when you're running these sections of underlayment, you want to ensure that the next row that you're installing is sitting, the bottom of your next row is sitting where this black line is. So in this case with ice and water, you would just run the top of this black line to the top of your ice and water, and that would be plenty of coverage for you. You can see that gives you at least a good 2-3 inches of coverage on your ice and water, and that's more than enough. In this case, just because we're working with a pretty tight area, we're just going to install it kind of like so. We're just going to line up. You can see we have many dotted lines here, and that's to help keep your shingle straight as you're installing. So we're just going to use one of those dotted lines. You can see this stuff just rolls right out. Pull this stuff tight. A lot of guys will use staples, cap nails, and if you're planning on stripping the roof and not shingling it right away, then cap nails are always highly recommended. Now, if you're going to be shingling the same day, then it's not necessary. You can just move forward with just standard nails. This particular brand doesn't want us using staples. You will see some guys out there who will use staple guns, and that's because they're quite a bit faster and easier to use compared to getting out all your nailing equipment and doing it that way. So there we go. We have our ice and water installed and our synthetic underlayment, and now we are ready for our first set of starter shingle. All right, guys, so now we are ready for our starter shingle installation. And, guys will have different ways of installing these. Me personally, I like to start with my eave starter and then I go for my gable. Some guys will tell you to install your gable starter and then move forward with your eaves because that automatically gives you an offset, but it misses the corner of the roof here where you're not going to get that additional tar, from the starter shingle. You're going to have a space here that's missing. So what I like to do is just cut off my 6 inches of my first starter. You cut off 6 inches from the full shingle, and that's so that we offset the joints from the starter shingle and your first run of your architectural shingles. So we have 6 inches cut off of this starter already, and now we're going to bring this down. Here in Southern Ontario, we have to overhang our shingles by 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So I like to just stick my fingers underneath and I give it a rough 1/4 to 1/2 inch overhang on both the eave of the roof and my rake of the roof. So you can see here we got our first starter in place, and you're good to nail that in place. I like to keep my nails a little bit higher on the starter shingle. So we nail that in place, and now we come over with our second starter and we run this up on the gable. So the reason I cut my 6 inches off is because I'm going to overlap my gable starter, my rake starter. What we're going to do, we're going to set that overhang. We're going to get this nailed in place. And then we're going to take our knife, our hook blade, and we're going to cut this off on a 45. This is going to remove some of the buildup that we're going to have when we lay our first shingle, but in addition, it gives us a full perimeter of this tar. So it's going to make sure, our shingle is fully stuck down all the way around, and we're not going to be missing an area here. So that's just my personal preference. Once you get your corners up, you're pretty well good to go. You got your 6 inch stagger cut off, and now you can just run in the rest of your starter shingles. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, guys, so now that we have all of our starter shingles installed along the perimeter of the roof, we're going to go ahead and look at installing our first architectural shingle. So the way we install these is, you can see here, I also just like to note, you can see our offset from our starter to our first shingle, and that's why we cut the 6 inches off, is so that this joint and this joint are staggered and they're not lined up. So So we pull our first architectural and we pull it down flush to the bottom of the starter shingle along the eave of the roof. And then I like to leave my shingle in just 1/8 of an inch along the rake. And that's so I have one nice straight line when you're looking down at the, from the ground and you're looking up at the roof. You don't see little jut outs here and there. So I like to keep my shingle in just 1/8 of an inch and then keep it flush along the eave. So this is pretty well ready to nail. And so now the biggest thing that we need to keep in mind when we're nailing our architecturals is our nailing pattern. So, our manufacturers ask for 4 to 6 nails per shingle. Now, your shingle count is going to change depending on the size of shingle, but for a full shingle, they want anywhere from 4 to 6 to meet factory, warranty specifications. So now these requirements are going to change if you're looking to qualify for a high wind warranty or things like that. But for just the standard out of the box warranty, you need 4 to 6 nails placed within this nailing zone. So me personally, I always like to try and nail within the common bond area. That's going to be the thickest part of the shingle and the strongest part to put those nails in place. So when we're looking to put 6 nails, which is what I typically recommend, you're going to try and keep all of your nails bunched in this 1.5 foot radius, and then you're going to skip and you're going to put one in the very end. So it's going to look like this. So we're going to put one in the very end, and then we're going to skip 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to put one in the very end, and you want to make sure that this end nail is just in roughly 1 to 2 inches so it's not punching through our drip edge. And now you'll see here as we grab our next shingle, we're going to want to cut this shingle. So we want to cut 6 to 8 inches off this next architectural. And this is going to create what we call a staircase pattern. So we take this cut off, we put it to the side, and we lay this shingle in place. And as you can see, this shingle joint now lands where we just skipped nailing. As you can see, all these nails over here that are grouped, those are all now covered by the shingle above it. And when we go to install our next shingle, we're looking to bring the bottom of this shingle up to where this raised lip is. So we bring our shingle down to that raised lip. We line it up on both sides. We keep our shingle in just 1/8 of an inch along the rake, and that is good to nail. So the same concept, you're going to put 4 to 6 nails. Now this is going to vary depending on the shingle size. You're not going to put 6 nails in a small section of shingle, but for something this size, you can maybe do 5 nails. So again, the same pattern continues. So we put one in the end, and then we skip 2, 3, 4, 5, one in the very end. Again, just keeping in mind to keep that nail back a little bit so we're not punching through the actual drip edge and leaving an exposed nail there. So now we continue our staircase pattern. Now what I like to sometimes do is take my shingle and I flip it upside down. And so when I make my cut, my cutting edge is actually facing the outside and it's lining up along the rake, and then it leaves me with the factory edge to butt my next shingle up to. So I bring my shingle, turn it upside down, kind of place it where I'd like along the rake, and then I look where I want to make my cut, and I slice. Put this cut off section to the side, never throw out your pieces. We're going to be using those in just a second. And then the same concept, you can see I have no areas in this keyway joint on my shingle. And that's super important because water is going to travel in these keyways. You're going to see here as we bring up this next row, water is going to travel in these keyways, and it's going to go actually underneath of these shingles. So that's why it's important to make sure no nails are directly, or even really super close to this joint here. So as we bring this next shingle down, we again line it up to that ridge, bring it up over to the edge of our rake, and that's good to install. One on the end, skip 2, 3, 4. So again, we don't need quite as many nails because it's a smaller section of shingle. So this is where we're going to start using our cutoffs. So it's a little bit big, so I'm going to cut off just a little piece off this, and I want to make sure I'm keeping that 6 to 8 inch staircase stagger consistent. So as I bring my next piece up, again, you can see where my joint lies. All my shingles are all my nails are nice and pushed back away from that joint. We bring that shingle down, we line it up on the ridge, keep us just inside of that rake starter. That's good to nail. 1, 2, 3. All right guys, so now the hard work is done. We have our staircase pattern with our architecturals, and we're just gonna follow this pattern all the way up the roof. So as we continue to shingle, all we're gonna be doing is butting up our shingles nice and tight to each other. Again, along the eave, you want to make sure that the bottom of your shingle is flush with your starter. 6 nails for full shingles. 2, 3, 4, 5. And then a nice little trick that I like is if you're using a pneumatic nailer, you take the top of the nail gun, you butt it up along that ridge, and then we just take, with our left hand, we grab a shingle, we line that up nicely, and install. And then for our next shingle, same thing. We butt them up nice and tight. Make sure everything is straight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ensuring that we leave a nice gap for our next shingle to come on top. And same deal. All right, so now we're gonna skip over to the other edge of the rake, and we're gonna show you guys how we meet, how we will come up to the second rake and how we'll cut off our shingles. All right guys, so as we come up to the opposite rake, what we're gonna be doing, and this is a very similar concept to if you have hips on your roof, or if you're coming up onto a hip. It's a little bit easier with hips, but what I like to do is turn my shingle upside down. It's the same concept as before, and that's so I have the majority of the weight of the shingle on my roof, and so it's not overhanging like this. I find this a lot more difficult to cut than this. So what I do is same concept, I keep this shingle just 1/8 of an inch inside my starter shingle, and then I line it up, or I look at where this shingle ends, and that's where I'm gonna cut. Okay, so we cut that shingle, and we bring that down to the bottom of our starter. Just a little bit more, and then that can get nailed in place. So I'm not as worried with these little pieces about where my nails are being placed, because I know a full shingle is going to be covering this entire area. So once I start hitting an area, you know, where the majority of the shingle weight is on the actual roof, then I'll lay them as normal. So we butt this shingle up to the one beside it. We bring this down to the ridge, and then we look to nail this shingle in place. So with these nail placements, it's the exact same thing as the other side. I keep them in roughly 1 inch to 2 inches. And then when I'm coming up on my rake, sometimes what I'll do is I'll cut this side a little bit on a harsher angle. And so that way I'm just not fighting it quite as much. And we'll come up along the bottom, try and cut this as straight as we can. Just like so. And if you need to do some trimming, then you need to do some trimming. You want to make sure you're taking your time during the process and not rushing things too much. You don't want to look down, from the ground at your roof and see all these little jut outs. It just doesn't look very good. So take your time with the process. It's like a Mona Lisa. All right, so we're just going to follow this same process all the way up the roof. And now with this shingle, you'll see that we're a little bit short of our rake edge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep my nails out of this far side. I'm just gonna nail the left side of my shingle. And instead of installing a really small piece here, Now instead of installing a really small piece of shingle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at where my nails are. I left a nice gap here, and I'm actually going to cut this shingle back a little bit. And so that's going to give me, just get that a little bit straighter. You know, when you're cutting your shingles, just try to make sure that you're not cutting the shingle below it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece and we're going to turn this upside down, keep it just 1/8 of an inch in, and cut that. And now we have a bigger section of shingle that we can just fit right into place. And you're going to be a lot better off than trying to fit in a really small piece. Just out of nails. All right, guys, so that is the basics of installing our architectural shingles. All right, guys, well, that is the end of this video. Hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully it helped a few of you out. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. We're more than happy to answer any of those. It's just starting to rain, so it's a perfect time to put this camera away and to wrap this video up. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more content in the future, and we will catch you in the next one.